all made up in my head.
Well, this is an interesting surprise. YouTube blessed me with some recommendations, and this guy claims to have solved FNAF 3. What's his name? Bond Swooch? Whatever. So yeah, the follow me theory. This is interesting. You know what? Let's just see. Let's just see where this takes us.
FNAF 3 probably has the most confusing story out of the first three. After FNAF 2's minigames introduced us to a new way of telling the game's story, FNAF 3 found out that they can also be used to directly contradict the rest of the established story. So I set out to finally put an end to FNAF 3's most confusing minigame. Here's how I saw
No. You know what? I don't even need to. You know what? It's chill. But here's, you know what? We're good. But here's what I think Follow Me is about. William Afton using Shadow Freddy to lure the animatronics to the safe room, dismantle them, harvest their remnant, put it into the fun times, which then become Ennard, which turns into Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy, etc., 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 Molten MCI. Read the books. Hello.
Follow me, we have to first look at another minigame, Midnight Motorist. In this minigame from FNAF 6,
Bro, Midnight Motorist again?
Until entering the secret lore section of the minigame referred to as Later That Night in the game's files.
It's like I'm reacting to only Midnight Motorist now.
A gray person watching TV, and an unknown male runaway who's had a bad day. Based on the fact that our player appears to live with his two sons, drives a purple car, and that this minigame is called Later That Night, it is very likely that the yellow man is William Afton. With this minigame taking place on the same night as Charlie's unaliving, very long nap. The reason this is relevant to solving Follow Me is to show that William Afton isn't always depicted as purple. In this instance, when he's not really doing anything shady, he isn't purple, like he is in the other minigames when he's up to no good. Furthermore, FNAF 4 shows us that purple is a way that Scott draws shadows in the minigames, as Fredbear and Spring Bonnie are purple when they're out of focus in the background. The next thing we need to establish before the story makes sense is that Follow Me takes place in the 80s. Now, the most common timeline placement for this minigame is in the 90s, is in the 90s, is in the 90s, is in the 90s. Sometime after.
This is my favorite part, because now I get to see all of you somewhere. Enjoy the timeline.
The FNAF 1 location is closed, but that's not the story that FNAF 3 tells. On night 2, Phone Dude tells us that he found a real animatronic, Springtrap, in a boarded up room in one of the old buildings.
It was like an extra room that got boarded up, or something like that. You're not gonna believe this. We found one. A real one. Well look, it's in there somewhere. I'm sure you'll see it.
This comes full circle when we hear some vintage audio training tapes from the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where we learn that they sealed off all of their safe rooms after some sort of incident involving the Spring Bonnie suit.
You previously mentioned safe rooms are being sealed at most locations, including this one.
Since the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was opened in 1983 and closed sometime before 1987 when the grand opening was announced, these recordings suggest that William Afton was spring-locked and sealed away before FNAF 2. Now, does this make sense? Well, for one, we're told—
I'm sorry, what? Okay, what? Wait, how can he be spring-locked and sealed away before FNAF 2 and also commit the DCI in FNAF 2? 2 years later.
Told in FNAF 2 that someone used a spare yellow suit that was kept in the restaurant. If spring locks were banned at the first restaurant and William was locked away wearing the Spring Bonnie suit, who would be using the suit? And what suit was it? It could have been Fredbear if they kept him around, or even another Spring Bonnie suit, but then again, who would have been using it if William is dead? Also, why does Phone Guy refer to this suit as a spare in the back, a yellow one? We know that he worked with in recording.
You're gonna say it's Golden Freddy, aren't you?
Of both of the yellow suits at the first
or Fredbear, whatever you want to call it.
He'd be able to name it only a few years later. Also, it's worth noting that the restaurant layout in Follow Me is practically identical to the layout of the FNAF 1 location. Even then, the animatronics in the mini—
That should tell you something right there. That should tell you something right there.
Game represent unwithered variants of the original animatronics from the early 80s, as Bonnie and Freddy have buttons like on their withered counterparts but without all of their damage. These animatronics wouldn't have been around after 1987. With that being said, it's entirely possible that the restaurant from FNAF 1 is the same location as the one from the early 80s.
Yes.
The restaurant opened with a very limited budget, and that they couldn't find a buyer for the first.
Hasn't it been established that the MCI location is the same as the FNAF 1 location, and vice versa?
Restaurant after it closed. A building the company already owned would be a great location for a new cost-effective pizzeria. Also, it can be assumed that Foxy was never properly fixed between FNAF 2 and 1, but his stage is in the new restaurant. In the Silver Eyes, the kids mention that Pirates Cove has been out of service for a very long time, with Jessica saying 10 years later and is still out of order, and John adding, I had one birthday back here. It was out of order then too. If this restaurant was the same building from the original pizzeria, which we know had a functioning Pirates Cove based on FNAF 2's phone calls,
I love those old characters. Did you ever see Foxy the Pirate?
10 out of 10 audio quality. I shouldn't be talking.
And how the original animatronics could be there in the 80s. In FNAF 3, Phone Dude digs up some audio training cassettes from the first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. In these recordings, we hear Phone Guy eerily remind employees not to take customers into the safe rooms.
This is just a reminder of company policy concerning the safe room. Under no circumstance should a customer ever be taken into this room and out of the main show area.
Why did he feel the need to remind employees of this policy?
Because of the MCI.
Disobeyed it. In the same recording, we learn that the Spring Bonnie suit was used
been
sometime
noticeably
after it was
moved.
banned from being used in the restaurant. This most likely describes the first MCI, which we learn more about in FNAF 1's newspapers. In these articles, we learn that 5 children were lured into a back room by a man dressed as a company mascot, and that their bodies were never found. We also find out that the restaurant stayed open for a few years after, and that parents had been complaining about the animatronics smelling and looking as if they were leaking blood. This is how we found out that the bodies were stuffed into the suits. I actually just glossed over an important detail. In FNAF 1, we learn that the first restaurant stayed open for a few years after this incident while struggling to stay in business. In FNAF 2, we find out that the old restaurant was left to rot for quite a while.
That old restaurant was kind of left to rot for quite a while.
And finally, in FNAF 3, we hear that the reason the safe rooms were being sealed was due to budget restrictions.
Due to budget restrictions, he previously mentioned
That's a bullshit answer, by the way.
at most locations, including this one.
So if we put all of these pieces together, you'll realize that the FNAF 3 training tapes take place over a series of years. It's easy to assume that these recordings all take place in 1 week, since the second call takes place the day after the first.
We will cover this in more detail in tomorrow's session.
But the later calls are actually dramatically spaced out. In hindsight, it makes sense that there wouldn't have been 3 major events happening on 3 consecutive days, but rather that the tapes are only recorded when necessary information is needed to be relayed. For instance, after the first 2 tapes recording proper spring lock use, there isn't any more important information to share until the next tape, when we learn that the spring locks are being discontinued.
There's been a slight change of company policy.
I mean, yeah.
Don't. The company has deemed the suit temporarily unfit for employees.
Which likely happened long after the first training tapes were recorded. So why is this important? It explains why the restaurant is in such bad condition during the Follow Me minigames. After the MCI described on night 5, the company spent years trying to keep the business afloat, which led to the place being left to rot and the company eventually running out of money, causing them to seal up the safe rooms as we hear in the night 6 recording.
Are you saying, wait, hold on. Are you saying that Follow Me is in the MCI location and not after FNAF 1?
Another part of Follow Me we have to solve, Shadow Freddy. First, why does he appear to be helping William to dismantle the animatronics?
Because he's William's evil. Nightmare says this.
Second, how was he moving? Shadow Freddy first appeared in FNAF 2.
I turned on captions by accident.
As a recolor of Withered Golden Freddy, and returned in FNAF 3 using pretty much the same.
Okay. This is like my domain, all you Jujutsu Kaisen fans. So Shadow Freddy, he takes a form. I think he takes the form of Golden Freddy, aka Fredbear, because it's the crying child's worst fears. That's a whole, it's a whole different thing. He also appears in every game except FNAF 6 that William appears in. Did you notice that?
The same model. Interestingly, in both of these games, he's never seen walking, or even standing for that matter. We also learn in FNAF 3 that the safe rooms are invisible to animatronics, meaning they can't enter them.
Every location
That's what...
is built with one extra room that is not included in the digital map layouts programmed to animatronics or security systems. This room is invisible to animatronics.
So that leaves us with one conclusion. Shadow Freddy isn't an animatronic. So what is he?
No. Really? No. Can you play that Nightmare voice line, please? Just...
I am your wickedness, made of flesh.
It's possible that he's an apparition or some sort of agony creature, but there's another
Yes! Oh, okay. What's the other possibility?
That I find intriguing. First, the Freddy Files refers to Shadow Freddy in FNAF 3 as Crumpled Freddy Suit,
Yeah.
not Shadow Freddy. Of course, we know that he is Shadow Freddy, but the guide has an interesting take on him. Second is the fact that he's literally a recolor of Withered Golden Freddy, who most
Not really, but very, very close. Like 96%.
people theorize to be a version of Fredbear. Since we know that Scott uses purple to depict shadows in minigames, specifically when it comes to yellow things, and the fact that this character is canonically named Shadow Freddy, despite being a recolor of Golden Freddy, I think that Shadow Freddy was initially Golden Freddy, Freddy Fazbear's version of Fredbear. This would explain how he's able to walk and enter the safe room in the minigame. He's not an animatronic, he's a person wearing the Fredbear Springlock suit. So if Shadow Freddy is really just a crumpled Fredbear suit, where did he come from?
Wait, hold the phone. Okay. So let's go over what Nightmare, who is Shadow Freddy, according to the FNAF 4 files, says. I am your wickedness made of flesh. This pretty much, like, that line alone almost makes this entire Shadow Freddy theory fall apart. So, what do we do now?
In 1983, Fazbear Entertainment had seen massive success with their restaurant Fredbear's Family Diner. Seeing how popular their diner had
Oh, Fredbear is huge. He's covering some shit.
become, the company decided to expand by opening a new restaurant, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Freddy's featured 4 new characters, Freddy, Chica, Bonnie, and Foxy, as well as 2 returning characters from the already popular diner, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie. Of course, Fazbear Entertainment couldn't afford to pull 2 of the animatronics from Fredbear's Family Diner to use in the new restaurant, so they took older models from storage and brought them to Freddy's. The new restaurant was an instant hit. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza became so popular that people were starting to forget about the old characters. And then of course, there was an incident. One day at the sister location, Fredbear's Family Diner,
There was a Springlock incident, and let me guess, you're gonna say that that's Fredbear turning that into Shadow Freddy.
Because of this, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie were put into
You're gonna say the Springlock incident was actually Fredbear in a guy in the suit who becomes Shadow Freddy, right?
storage and left to be looked at by technicians. These suits were not to be touched, activated, or worn. We know that William used the Spring Bonnie suit to do the MCI, but what became of Fredbear? The animatronics in Follow Me depict the animatronics from the first pizzeria before they were withered, and likely before they were possessed. We also know from the minigame Give Gifts Give Life that there was a 5th kid who wasn't put into a suit like the other
Follow
four.
Me
Follow Me
in
I believe William got into the
1983?
Fredbear suit and used it to lure the
What?
animatronics to the safe room. That would explain why it's purple. Like William throughout the minigames, something yellow is shown as purple when it's in the shadows or doing something otherwise shady. As for its appearance outside of the minigames, it's possible that William did eventually spawn an agony creature by committing such a heinous act that night.
Charlotte's
William
murder.
dons the yellow suit and lures the animatronics to the safe room, where he quickly sheds the suit and runs out to dismantle them. After all 4 of the animatronics are in pieces...
Wait, are you saying William is in the Shadow Freddy suit who, like, never mind.
He begins stuffing the suits. For the most part,
He
the
stuffs
spirits
the
are helpless.
suits?
They watch idly as their flesh is desecrated by a man who they'd never met. But there was another, someone who had more will than the others, more intent. His anger and vindictiveness allowed him to control his spirit unlike the others. As William finished hiding his first 4 victims, he saw a spirit manifest in the room, heading straight for him. William ran away panicked for a while until he had a bright
Interesting.
idea. The Springlock suit that he used to overpower the children the first time was right
Did you guys notice how he referred to the 5th spirit as a he?
there. If he could put that back on, surely he could overpower them again. So he did, and it worked at first. Having escaped sudden death, William became a victim of his own hubris, laughing and basking in his glory. He must have forgotten the reason the suits were banned in the first place. Whether it was his excessive breathing or the dampness of his environment, William exceeded the conditions for a Springlock failure. His luck had finally run out. Karma had returned him with only a fraction of what he deserved. It always comes back.
Huh. I must say the main problem I have is with him putting Follow Me in 1983. And saying that Follow Me somehow happens before FNAF 1, or maybe I misunderstood. But in order for it to happen, the classics have to be possessed. So It can't be before the MCI. Uh, and as for Shadow Freddy, he's just a agony. He's just a shadow made from Charlotte's death. Pretty simple. But yeah, I did interesting theory. I guess I'll give it like a 7 out of 10. It's pretty. Actually, you know what? I'll give it an 8. I'll give it like a 7.5. There you go. 7.5. That's 75. That's perfectly average. So boom. Yeah.